My name is Jeff Morgan. I am from Dallas, Texas. I want to encourage anybody who's watching this video to watch the documentary Erasing Family. Personally, I've waited several years for this documentary to be produced and to be released, and finally, on April the 25th, also known as Parental Alienation Awareness Day, the film is going to be released. It will be released on Vimeo on April the 25th. I will have details pertaining to the release at the end of this video, but I am going to encourage you to please take your time to watch this documentary. The thesis of the documentary is this: we need to strengthen family bonds after divorce and not erase them. Hence the title of the documentary, Erasing Families. We should not be erasing families, and yet too often what happens after divorce or some type of separation, over half of a child's family can be easily erased. Parents, grandparents, and other people involved should not be seeking to erase those bonds. They should instead be finding ways to strengthen the bonds. That the parent-child relationship, that the child relationship with grandparents and uncles and aunts remains firm and intact, not erased. The movie is talking about reuniting families. In North America today, over 25 million parents are being erased from their children's lives after divorce and separation. In most cases, this has led to an epidemic of fatherlessness. In more and more cases, it's leading to an epidemic of motherlessness. In many cases, it also means that children will grow up without the influence of half of their family, whether it be grandparents, uncles and aunts, or cousins. In other cases, it even means that children will be separated, that a brother or a sister will be separated from another brother or a sister. That is what divorce and separation does. We need to be restoring family bonds, not destroying them and not erasing them. Ginger Gentile, the producer and director of this documentary, has many times stated that the idea of family bond destruction should be considered a public health crisis, because what happens when family bonds are erased, when they are destroyed, has huge detrimental effects upon children, upon grandchildren, upon society itself. Ginger did a previous documentary in South America called Erasing Fathers. Now, her documentary exposed how fathers were being erased from the lives of their children in South American countries. As a result of that documentary and the opposition that there was to it, there became a movement that we should no longer be erasing fathers from children's lives. Government policy in several countries was changed because of the effect of this movie. In this documentary, which I believe is a follow-up or a sequel to Erasing Fathers, Ginger has expanded the topic beyond just fathers and has talked about erasing fathers, erasing mothers, erasing uncles and aunts, erasing cousins, erasing grandma and granddad, erasing brothers and sisters, erasing pets. This is an epidemic, a crisis, and yet we were refusing to talk about it. In many cases, we are refusing to even acknowledge that such a crisis exists. And in too many cases, those people who do know that it exists defend it because they stand to profit by it. To some degree, children are being used as pawns. They are being weaponized to erase the bonds that existed between them and other members of their families. And unfortunately, once again, we are not looking at this as the grave crisis that it is and the consequences that we have experienced in our society because of it. I first met Ginger about 4 years ago, and I got involved with this project because of my own two grandchildren, Cruz and Gideon Morgan. The situation that happened with me is that I had been watching my grandchildren sometimes up to 5 times a week, babysitting them while my daughter was working. My daughter got pregnant after my wife filed for a divorce, and not only did she get pregnant once, she got pregnant twice, so there were 2 grandchildren. In spite of my ex-wife's attempt to try to have her put the children up for adoption, I told my daughter that I would be there to help in any way that I could, financial, whatever that may be. And I was babysitting my grandchildren many times over the course of 8 to 10 months, sometimes as many times as 5 times a week. To some degree, my grandchildren practically lived with us during the week on many occasions. And if they were not staying here with us, I would often be at their apartment with them. When my youngest grandson had different medical issues, I paid for them. I was there when they went to the doctor, made sure that everything was being taken care of. And yet there was a situation that occurred that the hospital itself, Children's Medical Center down in Dallas, Texas, or somebody from the hospital called Children's Protective Services. And Children's Protective Services decided to investigate my daughter and the 2 children. Again, I and my wife were very actively involved in my grandchildren's lives, and it was because we called them up, we took the steps that were necessary, that Children's Protective Services called off the investigation because we were a strong safety net. And yet one thing that I begged Children's Protective Services to do was to tell my daughter that I had nothing to do with the report that had been filed. Because of this report, I got blamed for it. And my former wife and other members of the family used this as a means to target me. As of April of 25th of this year, it is now 5 years since I have seen my grandchildren, since I have babysat my grandchildren. And this is how I became involved with this project called Erasing Family. Prior to this, my daughter had communicated to me that she wanted me to be always actively involved in the children's lives because I was so good for them, and she knew that if I were actively involved in their lives, that they would turn out okay. My daughter told me that she would erase my memory from their lives. And that's when I talked with Ginger and she was talking about the movie Erasing Family. I wanted to be involved because I wanted my grandchildren to know that there was a grandfather who loved them, who cared for them, and was not going to allow himself to willingly be erased from their lives. He was going to make sure that when they got older, they would know that their grandfather was fighting for them, that their grandfather loved them and cared for them. As a result, I became a sponsor of this documentary. I gave a certain amount of money and other things toward it, so I'm listed as an associate producer. It was done for one reason. It was done once again so that my grandchildren would know that they had a grandfather who loved them and who cared for them. I have not yet seen this documentary in its entirety. I have seen video clips of it. I've seen it while it's been in progress. I think there's been several iterations of the documentary itself, so I can't speak as to what all the documentary is going to address right now. Ginger and I have spoken personally and over the phone on numerous occasions, and the interesting thing is that Ginger and I probably disagree on a lot of things philosophically and from various viewpoints, but nevertheless, we agree with this, that family bond destruction should be considered a family health crisis, and government policy too often facilitates family bond destruction. And churches too often are silent when they should be speaking against family bond destruction. And too often it is the parent who is seeking to destroy the other side of the family who gets rewarded for family bond destruction. So even though I haven't seen the movie, I support the project 100%, and I am thankful that Ginger took several years out of her life to do the shooting, the filming, the editing, and to put this product together. So Ginger, I want to thank you for devoting several years of your life to this project, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of this documentary as well by financially supporting it. I want my grandchildren to know, Cruz and Gideon Morgan to know, that they had a grandfather that loved them and cared for them and kept fighting for them. And when they're old enough to see this, they will know that. So thank you for that. If you're a member of the public, I'm going to ask you, encourage you, beg you, please watch this documentary. This is a public health crisis. The public health crisis has been invisible to many people, but it is much more widely spread than the COVID-19 crisis. The COVID-19 crisis looks like a drop in a bucket compared to the epidemic, the pandemic of family bond destruction that is taking place in our society today. Again, please watch it. Thank you for listening.